I really try to think about like what do I need to be doing right now to take care of myself so that I am present for them, to be able to answer the questions of who is this girl, Breonna Taylor, on my t-shirt, and why do we want to arrest the cops?
You mentioned a minute ago about how some people look at the roles you decide to play as political choices just because you're a Black woman, and how dare you think about taking roles that actually, highlight what it's like in America to be a Black woman or different facets of that dynamic. But clearly these choices are working out because you are sitting on 4 Emmy nominations right now at the taping of this podcast. That's a lot of Emmys, a lot of Emmy nominations rather. What does that mean to you, if anything?
I don't know. I mean, it goes back a little bit to what I said before. Like I do think it's really important to me to make sure that my sense of self, that my validation does not come from outside myself, right? Like I have to, my measure of success, I really try for my measure of success to come from how hard I worked, like how much of myself I put out there and how I feel about it. But it's undeniable that when other people also share in my feeling good about the work, it's affirming and it's exciting. But I think particularly this year, like when I look at those nominations, when I look at a nomination for Little Fires, or when I look at a nomination for American Son in particular, again, like what that tells me is that those Black women have been seen, right? Like it tells me that audiences are seeing Mia and audiences are seeing Kendra. They are seeing these Black mothers who are making challenging decisions when they are confronted with racism overtly and covertly, that they are, for people to acknowledge those performances, they're acknowledging those Black women. And that means a lot to me because again, it's like, for me, this work, all of the work, whether it's about voting or the census or the stories I'm telling on screen, it's about, can we see each other? Like, can we see each other in a country where Black people in the Constitution were designated 3/5 of a human being? Can you see my full humanity as a Black woman? That to me is what the work is.
Mm. I'm sure obviously when you did American Son, both as a Broadway play and then on Netflix, you could not have predicted that we would be in this time that we're in now. And I think I read somewhere that about how American Son saw a huge amount of viewership because people are relating it so much, to this moment. When that project first came, your way, were you thinking that this was going to make a statement? I have to say, for my heart rate, it is, that is something to watch. Like when I watched this, I was like on the edge the whole time, like, what is happening? It does send you through a ton of different emotions from a lot of different perspectives, not just the perspective of the parents that are involved as they look for their son, but felt like why was it important to have a project like this to do?
Yeah, I guess when I first read American Son, I think I was drawn to it because I don't know, it felt like 4 very different people having private conversations in public, like saying things to each other in public that we normally only say in our separate circles. And I think we live in a world, especially right now, where because of the way the 24 news hours cycles go and the way these different channels have set themselves up and the way social media kind of gives you news that already agrees with the things you believe, we tend to not be having these tough conversations across identity lines, right? Like we have conversations with people who look like us and sound like us and think the same things we do, but we don't brave conversations across those lines to try to understand each other. And I felt like that's what these 4 characters were really struggling to do. And I thought that was important. And I just had never, I felt like, so often when we meet the Kendras, when we meet the mothers of kids who come up against police violence, it's after the incident, it's after the tragedy. And so I loved the idea of us being like intimately embedded with this mom on the ride when the stakes are high, before she's a victim, when she's like a concerned mother, because every mother is a concerned mother. It's part of the job description. Once you become a mother, your concern goes skyrocketing, right? But when you're a Black mother, that's complicated by the fact that there are these systems in place to demonize your child. So there was a lot. I think also like just the fact that she was in a lot of ways the Olivia Pope, right? Like I had spent 7 years playing this very particular kind of woman, of Black woman, and Kendra was like everything that Olivia is not. They were just polar opposites. And I think I was drawn to that exercise also just as an artist, right? Like it's like the great athletes who pick up the opposite sport. You go from basketball to baseball, but because it's like a challenge and you want to grow.
Mm. So, with this role in particular, you mentioned how the different perspectives. Was there a perspective that was in the script of something that you yourself, you found it something like, I hadn't really kind of thought of it from this angle?
A lot of it, all the other three characters, all those guys had moments when I read it that I was like, oh, wow. I still felt like Kendra was right because that's my job to feel like she knows the most. She is the closest to the truth. But as a producer, also I really had to make sure that the other characters felt believable and grounded, and we had such phenomenal actors to do that, and our brilliant director Kenny Leon. But yeah, I felt like I learned from all three of those other characters. And I hope that they learned from Kendra. I know that they did because I love those guys and they always said that they did. But
so what's it like being a Black mother during this time of like, I wouldn't know how to describe what 2020 is right now, but I imagine it's made your job quite difficult with all the things happening in the country. COVID, you have, the pandemics of racism and, a virus running, kind of neck and neck for attention. So as a mother, how do you handle this time? How do you put it in perspective for your children?
it's so interesting. It's like, I don't know. I think we're all trying to keep it in perspective, right? Or like we're all trying to, that's not the right way to say it. I think that what I mean is we're all trying to wrap our heads around this moment and meet this moment. So I do think a big part of it is like self-care. I know that might sound crazy and corny, but like I really try to think about like what do I need to be doing right now to take care of myself so that I am present for them, to be able to answer the questions of who is this girl Breonna Taylor on my t-shirt and why do we want to arrest the cops, like to be having those conversations with young children. It requires a lot of presence and like ability to navigate their journey with this information, and to be there for them because there's so much uncertainty in the world. And I don't think that my job as a mom is to take away all the uncertainty, because dealing with uncertainty is part of the human experience, but can I like navigate the uncertainty with them and try to mitigate what is age appropriate. It's challenging. It's an ongoing
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. That's what I'm most curious about. Is I know that there's probably a part of you that wants to maintain their innocence, but at the same time, it's not easy to do in this environment. So how do you juggle that? I don't have children, and I couldn't imagine how I would talk to a child of a certain age about racism in this country. So how do you find the balance between wanting them to be informed but wanting to preserve their innocence?
Yeah, it's a balance. It's a balance. And ours range in age from 3 to 14. So it's different. It's different for each one. And you got to know your kid and again, like that presence, that ability to be like fully in the moment and like share some information and then share more and decide when not to. But maybe, it's just, I think it's a dance. But I find that actually for me, like one of the things I need to do is to make sure that I'm doing that balance for myself, right? Like not to maintain my innocence per se, but like to maintain my sanity and my calm while also still getting the information that I need. And and like facing the realities that I need to face. So it's like I have to start again. I have to start with me. Like right now, I'm reading Isabel Wilkerson's Cast.
Oh, I am too.
And I'm going back and forth between like sometimes reading it, sometimes listening to it, because sometimes I have to like physically put it down, but I want to keep going. And even that idea of like taking care of myself enough to take in the information in the way that my body can metabolize it in a moment. Sometimes I'm listening to it and then I'm like, well, let me stop listening to it because I want to go highlight that in the book, right? Like going and it's hard. It's like, it's such necessary information. Like, what an important work, and so important even for me to be contextualizing this moment we're in with world history, and like even just to know like on the positive note, to look at my computer and look at your face and look at my face and say like, we are a miracle, right? Like if our ancestors knew who we could be and what we could be doing, and that we could even share space in this way and have the level of agency and freedom and liberation that we have, as limited as it is in ways by these institutions that try to impact our lives, we still are, quite frankly, the manifestation of their dreams. And reading her work reminds me of that. It also just reminds me of how much work we still have to do. But yeah, so that doing that dance with myself is where I have to start, and then I can even begin to start to think about it with the kids. But it's all necessary,
Yeah, it is tough though, because I think Cass is brilliant. I also read Warmth of Other Suns, her first novel, which is, I think, should be required reading for a lot of people in this country, as should Cass.